I walked into my ex's wedding with our 8-year-old twins, wearing a dress that cost more than his yearly salary, and watched his face drain of all color as he realized the woman he threw away like trash had become everything he could never afford. My name is Jessica Turner. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I went from being abandoned pregnant with $20 in my pocket to landing at his wedding in a private jet, proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply showing up and being undeniably successful. 8 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was 20 years old, working double shifts at a diner in downtown Chicago, dating Marcus Reed, a guy I thought was the love of my life. We met at community college where he was studying business, and I was taking classes in graphic design whenever I could afford them. Marcus was charming, confident, always talking about his big plans, about how he was going to build an empire, how we were going to have this incredible life together. I believed every single word because when you're 20 and in love, you think promises are as solid as contracts. We'd been together for 2 years when I found out I was pregnant. I remember standing in the tiny bathroom of our shared apartment, staring at those 2 pink lines, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the test. Part of me was terrified because we were barely making rent, but another part of me was genuinely excited because Marcus and I had talked about our future, about having a family someday. I thought someday had just arrived a little earlier than planned. I waited until he got home from his shift at the electronics store, made his favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with garlic bread, and told him after we ate. I'll never forget the look on his face. It wasn't joy or even surprise. It was pure horror, like I had just told him I'd committed a crime. He stood up from the table so fast his chair fell backward and crashed against the wall. He started pacing around our cramped living room, running his hands through his hair over and over, saying things like, "This can't be happening and I can't do this right now, and you need to take care of this." I sat there frozen, still holding my fork, trying to process what he meant by "take care of this." When I finally found my voice and asked him directly, he turned to me with this cold expression I had never seen before and said, I needed to get an abortion because he wasn't ready to be a father, and this would ruin everything he was working toward. I told him I wanted to keep the baby, that we could make it work, that people had babies in harder circumstances than ours. He laughed, actually laughed, and told me I was being naive and selfish. If you're finding this story relatable, or you're curious to hear how everything unfolds, I'd really appreciate it if you could click that subscribe button right now. We're working toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to this channel. Just hit that red button below the video. It takes 2 seconds and it helps us grow this community together. The argument went on for hours. Marcus kept insisting I get rid of it, using terms that made my skin crawl, calling the pregnancy a mistake and a problem to be solved. I kept telling him I couldn't do that I wanted this baby, even if he didn't. Around midnight, he grabbed his jacket and said he needed air, that he'd be back later and we'd figure this out. I stayed up all night waiting for him, sitting on our worn-out couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the door, but he never came home. The next morning, I called him 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I texted him asking where he was, telling him we needed to talk, begging him to just come home. Nothing. Radio silence. 3 days later, he finally showed up at the apartment while I was getting ready for my evening shift at the diner. He walked in like nothing had happened, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and started throwing his clothes into it. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me he was leaving, that his friend had a place across town and he was moving in there. I stood in the doorway blocking his path and demanded to know if he was seriously just abandoning me, abandoning us. He pushed past me, not roughly but firmly enough to make his point, walked to the kitchen, pulled out his wallet, and threw a $20 bill on the counter. I'm not even kidding, $20. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's all I can give you. Figure the rest out yourself. I never wanted this." I picked up that $20 bill with shaking hands and asked him if this was really how he wanted to do this, if he was really going to walk away from his own child. He zipped up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and said something that has echoed in my head every single day since. He said, "Those babies are your mistake, not mine. I told you what you needed to do, and you didn't listen, so now you deal with it." Then he walked out, just like that. The door slammed behind him, and I stood there in our kitchen holding a single $20 bill, pregnant with twins I didn't even know about yet. Completely alone. I found out it was twins 2 weeks later at my first prenatal appointment at the free clinic. The nurse doing the ultrasound got really quiet, moved the wand around, and then said, "Well, congratulations. Looks like you're having two." I burst into tears right there on the examination table. Not happy tears, terrified tears, because I could barely imagine taking care of one baby by myself, let alone two. The nurse held my hand and told me about resources, about programs for single mothers, about WIC and childcare assistance, and how I could apply for emergency housing. She was kind, patient, and for the first time since Marcus left, someone was treating me like I mattered. The next few months were the hardest of my entire life. I worked at the diner until I was 8 months pregnant, waddling around taking orders and refilling coffee cups with my swollen ankles killing me. My manager, Linda, was a tough older woman who had raised 4 kids on her own, and she took pity on me. She let me take extra shifts, gave me the better sections where customers tipped more, and even let me take home leftover food at the end of the night so I didn't have to spend money on groceries. I moved out of the apartment I'd shared with Marcus because I couldn't afford it alone, and into a studio in a rough neighborhood on the south side. It had bars on the windows, thin walls where I could hear my neighbors fighting at all hours, and a radiator that barely worked in the winter, but it was mine, and the rent was manageable. Your support really makes a difference. If you're enjoying this story, and you want to see how it all comes together, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us reach that goal. Just click that subscribe button below. It's quick and totally free. I gave birth to my twins, a boy and a girl, on a freezing February morning. I labored for 18 hours completely alone because I had no family in Chicago, and the few friends I had were either working or had drifted away after Marcus left. The nurses were amazing, though. They coached me through every contraction, held my hand, wiped my forehead, told me I was doing great, even when I wanted to give up. When they finally placed my babies on my chest, one on each side, I looked down at their tiny faces and made a promise. I promised them that I would give them everything, that I would never let them feel unwanted, that I would build a life for us, even if I had to work myself to the bone to do it. I named them Ethan and Emma. Ethan came out first, screaming his lungs out, with this full head of dark hair just like Marcus. Emma came 3 minutes later, quieter, calmer, with my green eyes. They were perfect and terrifying, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Those first few months were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, trying to breastfeed 2 babies at once. Crying from exhaustion and frustration and overwhelming love all at the same time. I went back to work at the diner when the twins were 6 weeks old because I had no choice. Linda helped me find a woman in the building, Mrs. Chen, who watched them during my shifts for way less than a daycare would have charged, but I knew I couldn't work at the diner forever. I needed something more, something that would actually provide a future for my kids. I had always been good with computers and design. It was what I'd been studying before everything fell apart. So I started taking freelance graphic design jobs online whenever the twins were sleeping. I'd work from midnight to 4 in the morning, designing logos, making flyers, doing website mock-ups for small businesses, anything people would pay me for. I taught myself advanced Photoshop, Illustrator, web design, video editing, everything I could learn from free tutorials and library books. I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, surviving on coffee and determination and the faces of my 2 babies who needed me to figure this out. Slowly, painfully slowly, things started to change. My freelance work got better, my portfolio grew stronger, and I started charging more. By the time the twins were 2, I was making more from design work than I was from the diner, so I quit the restaurant and went full-time freelance. By the time they were 3, I had steady clients and enough income to move us to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood with a little playground nearby. I was still struggling, still stressed about money constantly, but we were surviving and even occasionally thriving. The twins were happy, healthy, growing like weeds, and I was slowly building something real. Then everything shifted when the twins were 4 years old. I got contacted by a startup company that needed a complete brand identity package, logo, website, social media graphics, the whole thing. They were 3 tech guys who'd gotten venture capital funding and needed someone who could make their company look legitimate and professional. I threw everything I had into that project, working 16-hour days, perfecting every pixel, making revision after revision until it was exactly right. When I delivered the final package, they were blown away. They asked if I'd be interested in joining them as their head of design and marketing. The salary they offered was more money than I'd ever imagined making, plus equity in the company. I'd love for you to be part of this journey with us. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a perfect time to click that button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your subscription keeps this channel going and lets me know you're enjoying these stories. Hit that red subscribe button and let's grow together. That startup became my entire world for the next 4 years. I poured my heart into building that company's brand, into creating marketing campaigns that actually worked, into establishing their entire visual identity from the ground up. The company grew fast, faster than any of us expected. Within 2 years, we'd expanded from 3 guys in a shared office space to a team of 40 people in a real downtown building. Within 3 years, we were being featured in tech magazines and industry publications. And then, just after the twins turned 8, we got acquired. A major corporation bought us out for an amount of money that still doesn't feel real when I think about it. My equity stake, which I'd honestly barely understood when I signed on, suddenly translated into serious wealth. I went from being a single mom scraping by to having more money in my bank account than I'd earned in my entire previous life combined. I bought us a house. A real house with a yard and 4 bedrooms and a kitchen that wasn't falling apart. I bought a car, a nice, reliable car that didn't break down every other month. I paid off every single debt I'd accumulated over the years. I set up college funds for both kids that would cover any school they wanted to attend. And I started my own design agency, hiring other talented freelancers, taking on bigger clients, building something that was entirely mine. Through all of this, through every struggle and success, I never heard from Marcus. Not once. No call, no text, no attempt to meet his children or even ask if they existed. It was like we had completely ceased to exist in his world. I didn't pursue child support because honestly, I didn't want anything from him. I didn't want him to have any claim to my kids, any excuse to drift in and out of their lives when it was convenient for him. The twins knew they had a father somewhere, but I'd kept it vague, age-appropriate, telling them that sometimes adults can't be together, and that was okay, because we had each other, and we had enough love in our little family to fill an ocean. Then 6 months ago, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Brittany Summers, a name I vaguely recognized from Marcus's old social media posts back in the day. The message was brief and weirdly impersonal. It said she was getting married, that she was reaching out to some of Marcus's old friends and acquaintances, and would I be interested in attending the wedding? I stared at that message for a long time, my heart pounding, because obviously Marcus was the person she was marrying. I clicked on her profile, and sure enough, there were photos of them together. Marcus with his arm around this polished blonde woman, both of them smiling at charity events and fancy restaurants and vacation spots I recognized from travel magazines. I should have just deleted the message and moved on with my life. That would have been the mature, healthy thing to do. But something in me, something angry and petty and still hurt after all these years, wanted him to see what I'd become. I wanted him to see the twins he'd called a mistake. I wanted him to know that his $20 hadn't defined us, that we had survived and thrived without him, that his abandonment had been his loss, not ours. So I responded to Brittany's message. I told her I'd be delighted to attend, and asked about +2 since I'd be bringing my children. She responded enthusiastically, said children were welcome, sent me all the details. The wedding was set for a Saturday afternoon in late October at some exclusive country club in the northern suburbs, the kind of place with rolling golf courses and a waiting list for membership and valet parking. As the date approached, I went back and forth 1,000 times about whether this was a terrible idea, whether I was being vindictive, whether I should protect my kids from this situation. But Ethan and Emma were curious. They'd asked more questions about their father lately, and when I carefully, vaguely mentioned we might see him at an event, they wanted to go. They wanted to meet him. How could I say no to that? Please don't forget to subscribe if you're following along with this story. We're building a community here and working toward that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Every subscription matters and helps us keep creating content like this. Just click the subscribe button below the video. It really makes a difference. The morning of the wedding, I got up early and made sure the twins looked absolutely perfect. Ethan, in a little navy suit that made him look so grown-up and handsome. Emma in a dusty rose dress with her hair in careful curls. I wore a designer dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion, emerald green to match my eyes. Fitted perfectly, elegant without being flashy, paired with heels that cost more than my first car. I had my hair and makeup done professionally. I wanted to look successful, confident, completely unbothered. I chartered a private jet for the occasion, which was admittedly excessive, but I wanted to make an entrance and I had the means to do it. We landed at a small private airfield about 30 minutes from the country club. I'd arranged for a car service, a sleek black SUV with a professional driver who helped the twins in and complimented Emma on her dress. During the drive, my stomach was in knots. The twins were excited, bouncing in their seats, asking questions about the wedding, about whether there'd be cake, about whether they'd get to meet their dad. I'd prepared them as best I could, explained that their father and I hadn't spoken in a long time, that this might be emotional or awkward, that we'd stay as long as it felt okay and leave whenever we needed to. They seemed to understand, or at least they nodded seriously like they did. We arrived at the country club right as the ceremony was supposed to start. The place was gorgeous, all manicured lawns and flowering gardens and an elegant white tent set up for the reception. There were maybe 150 guests, everyone dressed in expensive clothes, servers walking around with trays of champagne, a string quartet playing classical music. It was the kind of wedding that screamed money and status and careful planning. We checked in at the guest table where a young woman with a clipboard looked us up, confirmed our names, and directed us toward the ceremony space. The ceremony was being held in the garden, white chairs set up in rows facing an elaborate floral arch. We slipped into seats near the back, just as the music changed, and the wedding party started walking down the aisle. Bridesmaids in champagne-colored dresses, groomsmen in gray suits, and then Marcus. I recognized him immediately, even though he'd changed, filled out a bit, had the beginnings of gray at his temples, wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe used to. He walked down the aisle with an older woman I assumed was his mother, both of them smiling, and took his place under the arch. Then came Brittany, the bride, in a massive white gown that must have required 6 people to help her get into. She was beautiful in that polished country club way, with perfect teeth and highlighted hair and professional makeup. The ceremony itself was standard, traditional vows about love and commitment, and forever. I watched Marcus's face as he said those words, promising to love and cherish Brittany, to be there in good times and bad. And I felt this strange mix of emotions, anger that he could promise forever to someone else when he'd abandoned his own children, sadness for what could have been if he'd been a different person. But mostly, surprisingly, I felt nothing. He was just a man I used to know, someone who'd made choices that pushed him out of our lives, and we'd been better for it. If you're invested in hearing how this confrontation plays out, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us achieve that goal. Click that subscribe button right now and be part of our growing community. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception tent for cocktail hour. The twins stuck close to me, holding my hands, taking in all the elegant details, the ice sculptures, the elaborate floral centerpieces, the tables laden with fancy appetizers. We got drinks from the bar, sparkling cider for the kids, and water for me because I needed to keep my head clear, and wandered around the edges of the party. I was trying to decide how to approach Marcus, or if I even should, when he spotted us. I watched his face go through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, horror, and something that might have been panic. He was standing with a group of men, probably his groomsmen, holding a glass of whiskey, laughing at something someone had said. Then his eyes landed on me, traveled down to the twins on either side of me, and the glass literally slipped from his hand. It hit the ground and shattered, whiskey splashing across the white tent floor, and everyone in his immediate vicinity turned to look. He stood there frozen, staring at us, while his friends asked if he was okay, and started helping clean up the broken glass. Brittany appeared at his side immediately, all-concerned bride, asking what happened, if he'd cut himself. He barely seemed to hear her. He was still staring at us, specifically at Ethan and Emma, and I could see him doing the math, seeing his own features reflected in our son's face, seeing the age of the kids and counting back years. I made the decision right then to walk over. I held the twins' hands firmly and crossed the tent, weaving through clusters of guests until we were standing right in front of Marcus. I smiled, calm and pleasant, and said, "Hello, Marcus. It's been a long time. Congratulations on your wedding." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Brittany was looking between us with growing confusion, clearly sensing something was very wrong. I introduced myself to her, explained that Marcus and I knew each other years ago, and that I'd received her lovely invitation. Then I gestured to the twins and said, "And these are my children, Ethan and Emma. They turned 8 in February." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Brittany's face went pale. She looked at Marcus, at the twins, at me, and I could see her putting the pieces together. Marcus finally found his voice and stammered something about needing to talk, about this not being the time or place. I agreed completely, smiled again, and said we didn't want to cause any disruption to his special day. We just wanted to pay our respects and let the children meet their father since they'd been asking questions. The word father came out steady and clear, loud enough that several nearby guests turned to listen. The next 20 minutes were chaos in the most polite, upper-class way possible. Brittany pulled Marcus aside for what was clearly an intense, whispered argument near the edge of the tent. Guests were whispering and staring. Marcus's mother, who'd apparently overheard enough, came over to meet her grandchildren with tears in her eyes, asking me where we'd been all these years, saying she never knew, that Marcus had never told her. I kept the twins close, answered her questions briefly, watched as this entire carefully constructed wedding day unraveled because of our presence. I hope you're finding this story as compelling as I found living through it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider clicking that button now. We're building something special here, and we'd love to have you as part of our community as we work toward 1,000 subscribers. It takes just a second, and it means the world. Marcus eventually came back over, without Brittany this time, and asked if we could talk privately. I agreed, but said the twins would stay in sight. I wasn't letting them out of my view in this chaos. We walked to a quieter corner of the garden, where we could still see into the tent. He looked at me with this mixture of desperation and anger and asked what I was doing here, why I was ruining his wedding, why I was showing up now after all these years. I stayed calm, kept my voice level, and reminded him that his fiancée invited me, that I had every right to attend an event I was invited to, and that our children had every right to meet their father. He had the audacity to say that I should have told him about them, that I should have reached out, that he could have been involved if he'd known. I actually laughed at that. I pulled out my phone, opened my photo gallery, and showed him pictures I'd kept from 8 years ago. Screenshots of all those calls I'd made that went unanswered, texts that were ignored, the last photo I had of that $20 bill he'd thrown at me before he walked out. I told him that I'd tried, that he'd made his choice very clear, that he'd called my babies a mistake and told me to figure it out myself. Every word I'd kept bottled up for 8 years came spilling out, calm but firm. Years of hurt and struggle and fighting to survive all on my own. He had no response to that. He stood there looking at the ground, his face red, his hands shaking. Finally, he asked what I wanted from him, if I was here for money, for child support, for some kind of revenge. I told him I didn't want anything from him at all. I'd raised these children for 8 years, without a penny of his help, had built a successful career, owned my own company, had more money than I'd ever need. I explained that I'd come because Brittany invited me, and because the twins deserved to know who their father was, even if he was someone who'd abandoned them. I said that what happened next was up to him. He could choose to be involved in their lives going forward, or he could continue to pretend they didn't exist. But either way, we'd be fine because we always had been. Then I took the twins, who'd been watching nervously from a distance, and introduced them properly to Marcus. I told them this was their father, the person they'd asked about. Ethan, brave and direct like he'd always been, asked Marcus why he'd never come to see them, if he didn't love them. Emma, more cautious, just stared at him with those big green eyes. Marcus crouched down to their level, and I saw tears on his face, actual tears, as he struggled to find words to explain the unexplainable. He told them he'd made mistakes, terrible mistakes, that he was sorry, that he hadn't known how to be a father back then, but he wanted to try now if they'd let him. I left the decision to the kids. I told them it was up to them whether they wanted their father in their lives, that I'd support whatever they decided, that there was no pressure either way. Ethan said he'd think about it. Emma asked if Marcus liked ice cream, because she wanted to go for ice cream and talk more if he did. It was such a simple, innocent request that it broke something in Marcus's face, and he nodded and said, yes. He loved ice cream. They could do that sometime soon if their mom said it was okay. Take a moment to subscribe if this story is resonating with you. We're so close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and each person who clicks that button helps us get there. Your support keeps this channel alive and thriving, so please hit subscribe below. We didn't stay much longer after that. The wedding reception was awkward and tense, with Brittany nowhere to be seen, and Marcus torn between his duties as a groom and this sudden confrontation with his past. I'd made my point. The twins had met their father, and there was nothing else we needed from that day. We slipped out during dinner service, got back in our car, and headed to the airfield. On the plane ride home, the twins asked 1,000 questions about Marcus, about what happens next, about whether they'd see him again. I answered as honestly as I could, explained that adults sometimes make choices they regret, that people can change, but that change takes time and proof, and that no matter what happened with their father, our family was solid and complete just as we were. In the weeks following the wedding, Marcus reached out. Tentative at first, awkward, clearly not knowing how to be a parent to kids he'd missed the first 8 years of. He sent messages asking if he could take them for ice cream like Emma had suggested, if he could come to their next soccer game, if they could do a video call. I let the twins decide what they were comfortable with, supervised every interaction, made it clear that he'd have to earn his place in their lives slowly and on their terms. He seemed to understand that, seemed genuinely remorseful, though whether that would translate into consistent long-term presence remained to be seen. Brittany, I learned through mutual acquaintances, had been devastated by the revelation at her wedding. Apparently Marcus had never mentioned us, had constructed this entire narrative of his past, that didn't include abandoning pregnant girlfriend and secret 8-year-old twins. The marriage lasted less than 6 months before she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and breach of trust. I felt a little bad about that, about disrupting someone else's life, but not bad enough to regret going. Sometimes the truth needs to come out, no matter how inconvenient the timing. Marcus has been making an effort with the kids over the past few months. He shows up when he says he will, takes them for outings, asks about their interests and their school, sends birthday and holiday gifts. He's paid a substantial amount in back child support without me even asking. Opened savings accounts for both kids, offered to help with anything they might need. Whether this consistency will last, or whether he'll disappear again when things get hard, I don't know. I'm cautiously allowing the relationship to develop while protecting my kids from getting too attached too fast. They deserve to have a father if he's going to actually be one, but I won't let them be hurt again by his choices. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined possible on that terrifying night 8 years ago, when Marcus walked out with my $20 in my hand and twins growing in my belly. My design agency is thriving. I'm taking on international clients. I've been featured in industry publications. I've spoken at conferences about entrepreneurship and succeeding as a single mother in business. The twins are happy, well-adjusted, excelling in school, surrounded by friends and opportunities. We take vacations. We have stability. We have love and laughter and a home filled with warmth. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, I think about that $20 bill and everything it represented. Marcus's dismissal of us, his certainty that we'd fail, his complete lack of faith in my ability to survive, let alone thrive. I've thought about framing it, that crumpled bill I kept all these years, as a reminder of where we started and how far we've come. But honestly, I don't need the reminder anymore. I lived it. I survived it. I built something beautiful from the ashes of his abandonment. Before we wrap up, I really want to ask you one more time to subscribe if you've made it this far in the story. We're working hard to reach that 1,000 subscriber mark, and your support is what makes this channel possible. Click that red subscribe button below, join our community, and help us keep sharing these real stories. It would mean so much. The day I walked into that wedding, I wasn't looking for reconciliation or even really for revenge. I was looking for closure, for validation, for Marcus to see that his cruel words and actions hadn't defined us. I wanted him to see that his mistake wasn't the twins, it was walking away from them. I wanted him to understand that the $20 he threw at me was insulting but ultimately irrelevant because I had something he'd never have, the unwavering determination of a mother who'd do anything for her children. Flying back from that wedding in a private jet with my twins beside me, watching them sleep in their fancy clothes with the seatbelts carefully fastened, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 years. Not vindication exactly, though there was some of that. Not satisfaction, though I'd be lying if I said seeing Marcus's face wasn't gratifying. What I felt was complete, whole. Like a chapter that had been left painfully open was finally closing. The ending written not by him but by me, and the beautiful life I'd built despite him. Every single obstacle I faced, every sleepless night, every moment of crushing doubt about whether I could do this alone, every time I wanted to give up but couldn't because 2 tiny humans needed me, it all led to this moment, to being able to walk into a room full of wealth and status and know that I belonged there not because of who I was connected to, but because of what I'd accomplished on my own. To showing my children that resilience isn't just a word, it's a choice you make every single day to keep moving forward even when the path seems impossible. Marcus can be part of their lives now if he chooses to be consistent and genuine. But whether he is or isn't, we'll be fine. We've always been fine because we had each other, and that was enough. That $20 he threw at me 8 years ago, that moment of ultimate dismissal and cruelty, it became the foundation of everything I built. Not because it was generous or helpful, but because it showed me exactly who I was dealing with, and exactly how much I could rely on anyone other than myself. It taught me that the only person you can truly count on is you, and that sometimes the worst moments of your life become the catalyst for your greatest transformations. If you've enjoyed this journey with me and you want to see more stories like this, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and be part of this amazing community we're building together. Thank you so much for listening. The twins ask me sometimes if I'm angry at their father for what he did, if I hate him, if I wish things had been different. I tell them the truth, which is that I used to be angry, used to lie awake burning with resentment and hurt, used to fantasize about moments exactly like the wedding where I could show him what he'd missed. But anger is exhausting, and eventually it burns itself out, leaving only truth behind. The truth is that Marcus's abandonment, as painful as it was, forced me to become stronger than I ever would have been otherwise. It forced me to dig deep and discover capabilities I didn't know I had. It forced me to build a life entirely on my own terms, without compromising or depending on anyone else's vision for my future. Would it have been easier if he'd stayed? If he'd stepped up and been a partner and a father? Absolutely. Would the twins have benefited from having two parents from the beginning? Probably. But we can't live in the world of what-ifs and hypotheticals. We can only live in the reality we're given and make the best of it. And that's exactly what we did. We took an impossible situation and turned it into something beautiful, something strong, something uniquely ours. I want other single mothers out there listening to this to know that it's possible. It's hard. It's so incredibly hard. There will be days when you want to collapse under the weight of it all, when you feel like you're failing at everything simultaneously. But you're not failing. You're surviving. And survival is the first step toward thriving. Every small victory matters. Every bill you manage to pay. Every meal you put on the table. Every smile on your child's face. Every night they go to bed safe and loved. Those things matter more than wealth or status or revenge. Those things are the real measure of success. The design agency I built, the money I earned, the private jet I chartered for that wedding, none of that defines who I am or what I've accomplished. What defines me is that I looked at my two newborn babies on that February morning 8 years ago, alone and terrified and broke. And I decided that I would give them the world, even if I had to create it from nothing. And I did. Not perfectly, not without mistakes and struggles and moments of doubt. But I did it. We did it together, the three of us, building our own little family unit that didn't need anyone else to be complete. One more time before I let you go, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're building something special here, sharing real stories from real people, and we'd love to have you as part of our community. Click that subscribe button below and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly makes all the difference. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful to Marcus for leaving, as twisted as that might sound. Not grateful for the pain or the struggle, or the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering how I'd make it through the next day. But grateful that he removed himself from our lives early enough that the twins never knew any different. Never felt the confusion and hurt of having a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. Grateful that his absence forced me to become the person I am now, strong and independent and capable of anything. Grateful that I got to experience every single first with my children without having to share them or compromise or negotiate with someone who didn't appreciate how precious they were. The twins are growing up knowing that their mother loves them unconditionally, that she worked herself to exhaustion to give them opportunities, that she never once made them feel like a burden or a mistake. They're growing up secure and confident, knowing their worth isn't determined by whether their father wanted them, but by the fact that they exist and they matter, and they're loved beyond measure. That's worth more than any amount of money, or any moment of vindication at a wedding could ever be. I still have that $20 bill tucked away in a drawer in my bedroom. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, this physical representation of the moment my old life ended and my new one began. It's worn and faded now, the edges soft from being folded and unfolded, but the number 20 is still visible on both sides. $20 to make an entire problem disappear. That's what Marcus thought we were worth. Instead, that $20 became the seed money for a multi-million-dollar life. Not because I spent it wisely, but because it showed me exactly how little I could count on anyone else, and exactly how much I needed to believe in myself. The wedding confrontation gave me closure I didn't even know I needed. For 8 years, Marcus existed in my mind as this larger-than-life figure of abandonment and betrayal, the man who destroyed my life and forced me into impossible circumstances. Seeing him again reduced him to normal size, just a regular man who made selfish choices and had to live with the consequences. He wasn't a villain in some dramatic story. He was just someone who wasn't strong enough or brave enough or mature enough to handle responsibility when it showed up unexpectedly. That's disappointing and sad, but it's not world-ending. It's just human weakness, something we all have in different forms. His current efforts to be present in the twins' lives show that people can grow and change, though whether that change is permanent remains to be seen. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm also not standing in the way. The twins deserve the chance to have a relationship with their father if he's genuinely committed to being one. And I'm secure enough in our bond that I'm not threatened by his presence. They know who was there for every scraped knee, every bad dream, every school play, every birthday party. They know who built this life for them. Marcus can add to that if he's capable of it, but he can't diminish what we already have. Sometimes I think about Brittany and wonder how her life unfolded after the divorce. I hope she found someone honest, someone who didn't construct elaborate lies about his past, someone who valued her enough to be truthful from the beginning. She didn't deserve to have her wedding day destroyed by the revelation that her groom had secret children he'd never mentioned. But she also deserved to know the truth before legally binding herself to someone with that kind of history. In a strange way, I might have done her a favor by showing up when I did, before she spent years building a life with someone who'd proven himself capable of abandoning his own children. The country club wedding, the private jet, the designer dress, all of it was theatrical and excessive and admittedly a bit petty, but it served its purpose. It announced loud and clear that the girl Marcus left pregnant and terrified had not just survived, but had absolutely flourished. It showed him and everyone in that tent that his assessment of the situation 8 years ago was catastrophically wrong. It gave me a moment of pure satisfaction that I won't apologize for enjoying, because sometimes you earn the right to show off a little bit after clawing your way up from rock bottom. My children are the greatest accomplishment of my life, not my business success, or my financial stability, or my ability to charter private jets. Every single thing I achieved was motivated by them, for them, because of them. They were my reason to keep going on the days when giving up seemed easier. They were my purpose when everything else felt meaningless. They were my motivation to become someone I could be proud of, someone they could be proud of. That $20 dismissal from Marcus became the foundation of an empire built on maternal love and sheer stubborn determination not to let circumstances define our future. I tell my story not to brag or to encourage others to seek revenge on people who wronged them, but to show that what feels like the end of your world can actually be the beginning of something better than you imagined possible. When Marcus walked out, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd failed at everything, that I'd be stuck in poverty forever, that I'd ruined any chance at happiness or success by choosing to keep my pregnancy. I was so completely wrong about all of that. The life I have now, the relationship I have with my children, the career I've built, the person I've become, none of it would exist if Marcus had stayed. His absence created space for me to grow in ways I never would have if I'd remained dependent on someone who didn't value me or our children. The twins are starting to understand the full story now that they're 8 and asking more complex questions. They know their father wasn't around when they were babies, that he chose to leave, that I raised them alone for a long time. They're processing that information in their own ways, sometimes angry at him, sometimes curious about him, sometimes indifferent. I don't poison them against him because I don't need to. The facts speak for themselves, and as they grow older, they'll draw their own conclusions about his character and his choices. What matters to me is that they never doubt for 1 second that they were wanted, that they were loved, that they were worth every sacrifice I made. There's a picture I keep on my desk at the office, taken the morning after the twins were born. I'm in the hospital bed looking absolutely exhausted, hair a mess, no makeup, still wearing that horrible hospital gown, with a baby in each arm. I look terrified and overwhelmed, and so young, barely more than a kid myself. But there's also something fierce in my eyes, a determination that I can see now even though I didn't recognize it then. That girl in the picture had no idea what she was capable of, no idea that she was about to embark on the hardest and most rewarding journey of her life. No idea that she'd end up here 8 years later running a successful company and raising 2 incredible kids. I keep that picture as a reminder of where we started, and as evidence that you never know your own strength until circumstances demand you discover it. Marcus's mother has become an unexpected presence in our lives. She was genuinely shocked to learn about the twins. Apparently, Marcus had told her some vague story about us breaking up amicably and going our separate ways without mentioning the pregnancy or the babies. She's been trying to make up for lost time, sending gifts, asking to video chat with the kids, wanting to be involved as a grandmother. The twins are cautious but curious, and I'm allowing supervised contact because it's not their grandmother's fault that her son made terrible choices. Family is complicated and messy, and sometimes it shows up late, but still deserves a chance to be present going forward. The design agency continues to grow beyond anything I imagined when I first started taking freelance jobs at midnight while the twins slept. We now have 15 employees, an office in a renovated warehouse downtown with exposed brick and huge windows, clients across the country and internationally. I still do hands-on design work because I love it, but I'm also learning to delegate, to trust my team, to step back and let other talented people contribute their skills and vision. Building something bigger than myself has been both terrifying and exhilarating. A whole new challenge after years of being a one-woman operation desperately trying to keep all the balls in the air. Success looks different than I expected it would. I thought it would feel like vindication, like proof that I was right and Marcus was wrong, like winning some competition I didn't know I was entered in. But it doesn't feel like any of those things. It feels like peace. It feels like coming home to my kids every evening and hearing about their days and helping with homework and making dinner together. It feels like being able to say yes when they ask for something without having to check my bank account first. It feels like security and stability and the knowledge that we're going to be okay no matter what happens. That's success. The rest is just window dressing. I've started speaking at events for single mothers and women in business, sharing my story, offering practical advice about building careers while raising children alone, talking about the realities of entrepreneurship and motherhood, and doing everything simultaneously while feeling like you're failing at all of it. The responses I get from women in the audience, the messages afterward from people telling me I inspired them or made them feel less alone, those mean more to me than any business award or financial milestone. If my story can help even one person believe they're capable of more than their current circumstances suggest, then everything I went through was worth it. The twins ask me sometimes if I'll ever get married, if they'll ever have a stepfather, if our family will ever look different than it does now. I tell them honestly that I'm open to the possibility, but I'm not looking for it. I'm not opposed to love or partnership, but I'm also not incomplete without it. We're a whole family just as we are, and anyone who wanted to join us would have to add to what we already have, not try to fix something that isn't broken. The twins seem satisfied with that answer, and honestly, so am I. Romance and partnership might happen someday, but they're not necessary for my happiness or fulfillment. I've built a full life without relying on anyone else, and that independence is something I value deeply. Looking at where we are now compared to where we were 8 years ago feels surreal. The cramped studio apartment with bars on the windows versus the 4-bedroom house with a yard. The constant anxiety about making rent versus the security of savings and investments. The bone-deep exhaustion of working 3 jobs versus the satisfaction of running my own company on my own terms. The fear and uncertainty versus the confidence and peace. It's not just that our circumstances changed, it's that I changed. I became someone I didn't know I could be, someone strong and capable and resourceful, someone who could look at an impossible situation and figure out how to not just survive it, but transform it into something beautiful. If I could go back and talk to that 20-year-old girl, standing in the kitchen holding a $20 bill and wondering how she'd ever survive, I'd tell her that she's about to discover reserves of strength she doesn't know she possesses. I'd tell her that the next 8 years are going to be brutally hard, but also incredibly rewarding. I'd tell her that those 2 babies growing inside her are going to be the best thing that ever happened to her, even though it doesn't feel that way right now. I'd tell her that Marcus leaving is going to hurt for a long time, but eventually she'll realize it was the best thing he could have done for all 3 of them. I'd tell her to trust herself, to believe in her capabilities, to know that she's enough just as she is, but I can't go back and tell that girl anything. All I can do is honor her struggle by living fully in the present she worked so hard to create, by appreciating every single thing we have, by never taking for granted the security and stability she fought for. That girl deserves to see that her efforts mattered, that her pain had purpose, that her determination paid off in ways she couldn't have imagined. She deserves to know that the twins she was terrified of raising alone are thriving, happy, loved, secure. She deserves to know that she did it. Against all odds and expectations, she actually did it. The wedding confrontation was a turning point, a moment of clarity and closure. But it wasn't the ending of our story. It was just another chapter, a satisfying one but not definitive. Our story continues every day in smaller, quieter ways that matter so much more than dramatic confrontations or vindictive reveals. It continues in the twins' laughter, in family dinners around our kitchen table, in bedtime stories and homework help and weekend adventures. It continues in my work, in the team I'm building, in the creative projects that challenge and fulfill me. It continues in the life we're living together, the 3 of us, our little family unit that doesn't need validation from anyone else because we know our worth. Marcus's $20 sit in my drawer as a relic of a different time, a reminder that sometimes the worst gifts become the best motivations. I don't need to frame it or display it or make it into something symbolic. It already is symbolic, representing the exact moment I realized I was truly on my own and would have to become someone entirely new to survive. That moment of abandonment became the catalyst for transformation, the push I needed to discover capabilities I'd never have accessed if life had been easier or more comfortable, or if Marcus had stayed and been a mediocre partner dragging us all down with his lack of vision and commitment. Everything I am now, everything we have now, everything we've built and accomplished and survived, it all traces back to that moment in the kitchen when Marcus threw money at his problem and walked away. He thought he was escaping responsibility. He thought he was saving himself from a burden. He thought $20 would make us disappear from his life and his conscience. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift he possibly could have, the gift of necessity, the gift of having no choice but to become stronger, the gift of building a life entirely on my own terms without compromise or dependency. He freed me to become someone I never would have been if he'd stayed. And for that, in a strange way, I'm actually grateful. The twins are 8 now, still young enough to need me for everything but old enough to be developing their own personalities, interests, dreams. Ethan wants to be a video game designer, spends hours creating elaborate worlds and characters in his notebooks. Emma wants to be a veterinarian, brings home every stray creature she finds and treats them like precious treasures. They're kind, confident, creative, secure. They know they're loved. They know their worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion or presence. They know that family doesn't have to look traditional to be strong. Those lessons matter more than any amount of wealth I could provide, or any vengeance I could extract from the man who abandoned us. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for listening, for being present, for allowing me to share this journey with you. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I'd be so grateful if you'd take that step now. We're building a community here of people who believe in resilience, in second chances, in the power of determination and love to overcome impossible odds. Click that subscribe button below, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and be part of something meaningful. Your support makes all the difference and allows us to keep sharing these real, raw, authentic stories. This is my story, the story of how I went from being abandoned pregnant with $20 to showing up at my ex's wedding in a private jet with the children he called a mistake. But more than that, it's the story of discovering that you're capable of so much more than you think, that rock bottom can be a foundation rather than an ending, that the worst moments of your life can become the catalyst for your greatest transformations. It's the story of maternal love as a superpower, of determination as a life skill, of resilience as a daily choice. It's the story of taking what was meant to destroy you and using it to build something beautiful instead. My name is Jessica Turner. I'm 28 years old, and I'm proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, raising your children with love and security, building a life you're proud of, and showing up occasionally just to remind people that their worst assumptions about you were completely wrong. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And please, if this resonated with you at all, hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Together, we're building something special, one story at a time.